You're listening to Prime by Cortex, a podcast where we normally sit down to talk about the Cortex Prime role playing game, but today's a special episode. Instead, today we'll be talking about a little project that my guest host and I have been working on for some time now, coming soon to Kickstarter, the Great Big Nomventure. You can look for the link to that in the show notes. Let me introduce today's co-host, Brittnay Hess.
Yes. Hi. It's been a fun project to work with on you, or work with you on. Oh
Yeah,
my goodness, I
it
didn't think
turns
that either.
out I'm the project. I'm a total mess, and Brittany's been working on me. Yeah, welcome to today's show. I'm glad to have you here, and I'm really excited to talk about the Great Big Nomventure. But first, let's get to know you a little bit. Britt, would you kindly tell our listeners who you are in relationship to this project and your tabletop experience? What did you get started on, and how long have you been gaming?
Most of my gaming throughout my life was actually video games. I loved role playing games, but I am one of the writers for the campaign books and play testers, all of that, like giving feedback as a developer for this. But you did all of the heavy lifting for the rules and stuff. Yeah, I just write the adventures and the children's books that go with them. My first actual tabletop role playing game was the bad one, 5e. And since then, we have ventured into Pathfinder 2. I'm running a couple of 5e games and then a couple of Emberwind games.
Yeah, awesome. So you are generally speaking a game master for these games, is that correct?
Yes. Well, I also get to play because, the forever GM thing doesn't really apply in our community. But it's been fun. Like I got started super late. I didn't try D&D in any iteration of it until like 2016. And then I had the world's worst DM and a very sour experience. So I said I was never going to play again. And then like 3 years later, I tried. So I'm like actually relatively new to tabletop games, unlike a lot of people in this space that have been playing it their whole lives.
It's such I think D&D or tabletop role playing games has become more and more mainstream than it ever has been, but it's still kind of this quote new thing, right? Where you try it and you get the wrong experience, you start getting the wrong ideas, and it does sour the whole thing. It can be hard to come back. But it sounds like you very quickly moved on to other like tabletop role playing games than the main one, the Dragon one. Yeah, I think to like elaborate on some of the ones that you brought up and some of the things that you've said, both of us work at Nomnivore Games. That is Nomnivore. And Nomnivore Games has a few things within their catalog. Their flagship game is the Ember One role playing game, which you brought up. That's a D20 system that is highly tactical, but there's also a lot of story driven narrative that you and I are working on for future projects for Emberwind. But Nomnivore Games also has a whole separate line of card games, Snack Attack and Dungeons and Dinos. And what you and I are working on, and what we're going to be talking on today, is a brand new project that kind of bridges the two, called the Great Big Nomventure, which is a role playing game for children, which is why you're writing children's books for Nomnivore Games.
Initially, I was writing them for my son because my son was born 3 months before COVID. I, at the time, worked in healthcare. My husband still works in healthcare. And he had a speech delay because he had no peer to peer contact because we took COVID very, very seriously. And it delayed him enough that when he would get angry, he would bang his head against things. So, after talking to multiple pediatric occupational therapists on what to do for it, they're like, just tell him a social story. And so that's how that first book developed. And I think it's going to be one of the campaign books will actually be inspired by that first book. So,
Right. Yeah. And you and I had been kind of working in parallel without realizing it, because I know Derek was working with you already to do this children's book when he approached me to start writing mechanics out for this new role playing game for children. So, Nomnivore Games already has Emberwind. that's more adult, at least in content. I do think younger players can learn Emberwind. It's not an incredibly hard system, but as far as like maturity goes, it is more geared toward 12 and up. And what the Great Big Nomventure is a game that's geared toward children's ages 5 through 11, which is a very still within itself a diverse age range, right?
Yes.
A 5-year-old has a different idea of what play is, and play is play plays a different role in a 5-year-old's life than it might comparatively to an older kid who's approaching that upper age range of like 10 or 11. What we have developed here is this card-based system that is very modular. This is something that is, as core, very easy for younger kids to pick up and play. We have very simple core mechanic where anytime you need to do something like you would in a given role playing game, be it Emberwind, Pathfinder, etc., you have skill checks there. But here, when you need to do some sort of check, we call that a test. What you're effectively doing is your adventure guide, your GM, as it were, is deciding how hard that test is by limiting how many draws you get from the deck of cards that you have. Your own deck of cards is kind of informed by certain traits, and we'll maybe get into that a little bit later. But the point is, you're trying to get at least 2 successful cards out of a deck of successes and failures. And if you do it, you score a win, which is fantastic.
And gratifying.
This is a very modular game with a very stated goal of making this into something that can be basically a child's first role playing game experience, where as a parent, as a caregiver, or maybe as like an older sibling, whomever you are, that's interested in bringing a young player into the hobby for the first time, you won't have to bend over backwards trying to strip down a system like, say, Pathfinder or D&D 5e or Emberwind into something that's easier and bite-sized for them to do. We've already done that for you. And our long-term goal here is to kind of help build that sort of gaming literacy that you and I, Britt, have already developed through our lifetime of playing video games, board games, role playing games. We want to basically onboard young players into the hobby by setting up all the like necessary tools to get familiar with concepts I can find in a variety of role playing games. So we do have this very simple mechanic as core, but as I mentioned earlier, we've made it modular.
Yeah, that's actually what I like about it, is the fact that, like, my 4-year-old can play this game, at the core rules, and then as he gets older, we can actually splice things that we've developed into it so that he gets more out of the game every time he plays, and it will help with his emotional complexity and how he's able to handle those as he works with people around him to solve problems.
Which is fantastic. So we are generally making these various mods to be plugins that you can pick up or drop in the middle of a game, and maybe you do that because the table isn't understanding the rule, or maybe they're playing creatively in a way to where, yeah, they're kind of sort of engaging the card system, but they have their own ideas for fun, especially with like the younger end of that age range that we are talking about. Some kids don't quite have that gaming literacy that they're getting from board games because maybe they just have a hard time with board games, or maybe they're not playing video games because they have little to no screen time. Whatever the case is, the beautiful thing about tabletop role-playing games is that you don't have to know all the rules up front in order to get into most tabletop role playing games. And so what we've done here is we've kind of organized our game in a way to where it's actually kind of a little bit of a roadmap. You start off with this base mechanic, and then when your table's ready, whether it's in that very first session or several sessions later, you start plugging in these other mods, as it were. The goal here is, this is a game that we're hoping grows with your players. On top of the mods that we provide, we also have a lot of professional contacts that Nomnivore Games has made over the years with actual like professionals who work with children on the daily. These are healthcare specialists, these are therapists, these are teachers. Part of our goal here is actually going to be writing mods or writing gaming materials to help children in a classroom or help them during a therapy session to basically be able to use this as a tool that is play, but also, for example, you brought it up earlier, Britt, navigate emotions that a child's going through in a safe environment that is maybe couched in a way that makes them open up a little bit more.
And I'm hoping that with some of the books that like we're gonna tackle some topics like dyspraxia and dyslexia. Dyslexia is the latest of the children's books that I've drafted. So that like it not only will it help teach them that they can be included in things because we're going to help make a game that is accessible to those things on top of just for children. I'm hoping that with the goal of the children's book will be to teach other people how to help their peers that may struggle with these issues. And, there will be good topics for your occupational therapist, such as the therapeutic things that a pediatric patient might go to an occupational therapist for. And then I'm hoping that we'll do some straight chaos games as well for the older end of the 10 to 11-year-olds. Maybe like, oh, let's do a pirate ship adventure while they're still reinforcing all of the things that they've learned from previous modular expansions. Not even expansions, that's not the right word because that indicates that like it'll be a future release and it's all in the game already.
Quick disclaimer, in case it wasn't already clear, but this game can be ran as just a normal role playing game. What we mean to do here is, in addition to being a role playing game, we hope to serve up tools for professionals by professionals to use the game in a proper environment as opposed to every adventure guide needing to be a licensed therapist. We want to provide support and continued support, obviously, down the road. And part of this is, conferring with these professionals that I've already talked about, some of whom are also contributing to the game design or the written like advice material. We're also going to be providing neurodivergent packages and resources as well with this game that you look into as you're trying to decide how you want to be able to use the Great Big Nomventure with the youngest players in your life. Britt, I think maybe it's a good time to go over exactly a couple of the mods, to say the least, and what people can expect out of the like actual gameplay.
Oh, yes. So we've talked about emotional complexity. This is something that you worked pretty hard on to get it just right within the game so that they can realize how they feel as they're tackling something that is adverse to their goals, such as just a quick example that's not actually in the books. Oh, I can't reach the cereal on top of the fridge, but I'm hungry. And like, how do you feel about that? I'm kidding. That's a very oversimplified.
No, yeah, no, it's fine. Yeah, basically, we don't have hit points in this game by default. Maybe something like that becomes a future mod. Probably not, based off of what you and I have discussed for the game development. But the closest thing would be emotions, and our Cortex Prime players who listen to this podcast normally for Cortex stuff might be familiar with this idea, as we do see this in a couple of Cortex Prime games. What Emotions does for us, while similar in idea to what you might see in the Cortex game, is a bit bigger and with a very, very specific intent. The emotions mod is something that you can apply to your game when you want to create a safe environment to kind of work through some stuff with your kid. Maybe they're having a hard time with, say, there's a new baby on the way, right? That's a very tough transition, very common transition that kids have to go through, and that could be a challenging time for them. And so being able to play in a space and kind of work through this subtly or maybe overtly, depending on how you want to couch that conversation with your child, this game allows that. So you have 6 slots for emotions, unlike what you might have seen in Cortex, where there's typically a discrete list of emotions and other stress factors. Here, it's just all emotions. There's not a concrete list, and none of the emotions are inherently good or bad. Emotions are big, complex things. Brittnay, you might have an emotion, 2 emotions listed down: excited for the game release, and then anxious for how well that might do. Right. So we were playing through a scenario. When we come to a point to where we have to make a test, like say you're walking at the block, Brit, and you see a cat in a tree that you want to try to help down, we kind of like look at your list of emotions, see what, if any, emotions are applicable to what you're doing and how you're going about getting this cat down from a tree. And we ask ourselves, well, is this, you only pick one, and we ask ourselves, is this one emotion helpful or hurting my chances at what I'm doing right now, right? And so you can look at like an emotion called excited. That's not inherently bad. It's great to be excited for stuff. But being overly excited as you're like calling down to a cat that doesn't know you to come down in a tree and excitedly like jumping up and down. Maybe you're trying to get them excited about like a ball that you happen to have on you. That could be scary for a cat, and so that might actually hurt your chances. So it's really about stopping and sort of interrogating, like, well, how do I feel? Is this really helping or hurting the situation? And if so, why not?
So how they build their characters is a lot like your Cortex players would be something that they would, or it would be something they'd recognize, right? Because it's the traits that you would choose. I
Right.
don't know. I've
Yeah.
not actually gotten to play Cortex. I've just
Yeah.
looked at it a couple of times, but
Absolutely criminal.
time,
Unbelievable.
time, man, time is a problem, especially
It
when you're
is.
on projects.
Alongside with emotions, which might sit on your character sheet and play this big role into what you do, how you do it, et cetera, et cetera. As far as like the actual character sheet goes, we opted to have a sort of free form trait list. We'll write in what traits are more specifically in our bigger book and give you a sort of guided approach to writing that, because it could be tough. But like Brittnay was saying, this is kind of similar to Cortex fans might be familiar with distinctions, which is a very universal trait. That's effectively what we're offering here. A given nomnivore, which are childlike dinosaurs, which you can see on our website and you might be familiar with already if you've played our card games.
Yeah, sorry. I totally jumped that track, but I was just like, wait, we didn't talk about that. And we were talking about
Yeah.
the traits and how, or
Yeah.
your emotions and how that might help or hinder, but also the
Mm,
traits that you use to describe your characters can also
right. Yeah.
like do
So
plus ones to your deck there.
when we go into a test, you're going to have your base amount of success cards in a deck of normally 8 cards. You'll have your success cards, and then you'll fill out the rest of that deck with failure cards. So, how many success cards you have in your deck? Well, there's a certain baseline here, and then we look at your character sheet between all these traits, or as Cortex players might know them, distinctions. Looking at that, we kind of figure out which trait, if any, is best for the test that you're doing and how you're going about it. And these traits are very free form. They're typically something about you, something you know how to do, something that you're working to learn how to do, like learning how to read. It could be that you're really tall. In the same manner that, we're looking to see whether emotion is helpful, you'll get another success card within your deck. And if you can't, that's okay. We'll add a failure, so that way we make sure that we're properly at 8 cards for this test. Or we'll kind of sit down and ask ourselves if we could be passing the limelight and learning how to share the limelight with other kids. The limelight being just this idea that, like, hey, the camera is currently on you right now. What do you do about this situation? And you might look at your character sheet, think to yourself, well, you know what? I think Britt is actually better suited for this. Britt is really tall. Well, in game, really tall, and can reach this cat better than I can. But maybe I could do something to help. And so, we have mechanics that you can use to like help each other out while you have the limelight and before you pass that limelight on. And, speaking of helping each other and kind of circling back to the emotions mod really quick, a big part of that is they'll eventually stack up and it could be very overwhelming. So, what do you do about that? Well, you can take time by yourself and sort of, self soothe, maybe go read a book, maybe take a nap, etc., and transform or remove an emotion from your sheet, making it easier for you in the future as you play through the game. Or ideally, and listeners who have listened to my previous episode on Tales of Zadia, which is also a kid-friendly Cortex game, know that my favorite thing from that game was this idea of a like sort of role-playing gameplay loop that's kind of baked in and encouraged by the game, and we've done that here. Ideally, another Nomnivore, another player as it were, will come up and help you with an emotion, either to transform it into something else or remove it. So if we think, Brit's Nomnivore has been overly excited and scaring the cat, maybe I take a moment to sit with Brit to like talk about like all of our favorite cats or whatever have you. And in doing so, we kind of like curve the excitement. We maybe transform that into a new emotion, which is Brit, maybe that's happy. Maybe you like hearing about cats. Or maybe that was enough to just calm you down in general, and we just removed the excitement emotion. So a lot of stuff is at play here where we're kind of looking at how you're going about things and what you have going on for yourself, whether that's traits or emotions.
Indeed. So I'm sitting here and my dark humor brain was like, well, I love cats, but the last time I heard about a cat, its last name was Schrodinger, and that just made me really sad. And now I can't help Kirby with the tree, or the
Oh
cat in the
no.
tree.
Yeah, no. So now Brittany's changed her excitement emotion to sad, and yeah, that's something we'll have to we'll have to work through. But I don't think that's really going to help us with the cat. When you're running this game, even when you're using that mod, it's really like this game's all about meeting your table where they're at. And maybe, it's not as important to interrogate every single instance of like, oh, how are you feeling about this or that? And yeah, we recommend like, if at all, like in a given scene, you just deal with one or two emotions in the scene, if at all, because, pacing wise, that can really slow things down. And sometimes that can even take away from what you're trying to do here, if you are trying to like look at a specific situation or very specific emotion to do these constant check-ins. We also have other mods for the game here, such as the trouble mod.
Because every kid eventually finds themselves facing big trouble, right?
Yeah, something like that. So basically, because you need like two successes for every test that you do, and because the harder a test is, the fewer draws that you get to make. Like, if something is like really hard, then you only get two draws, and in a deck of eight, where like potentially half of those cards are failure cards, it could be tough to get both of those successes that you need. The trouble mod is a very familiar concept because, again, we're trying to introduce children to various concepts found throughout the entire hobby. That includes this idea of success with a consequence. That's what the trouble mod is. When a Nomnivore has failed their test, the adventure guide, that's you, can decide to give them the win still, but it comes with some sort of trouble. Should usually be something that is, yes, is here, is distracting, but is easy to deal with. Sometimes it might be something that you can ignore for a little bit of time. Be mindful that the longer that you're ignoring it, the more that can kind of snowball and kind of hurt your chances for future wins. So, for example, here is say Britt is trying to sneak past the pirate queen, who's currently like snoozing in her like captain's quarters. And well, Britt, you didn't pass your little sneak test here, but I'm gonna give you the win anyways, and say that like the pirate queen's parrot has suddenly roused themselves from their own little nap in their cage, in their bird cage, and have taken an interest in you. They're not cawing yet, but you feel like you might not have enough time to get through the situation. What do you do? And if we're playing with the emotions mod, depending on how much we've been hammering into that over the scene or over the course of the gameplay, I might ask you like, "Oh, also, how does that make you feel?" Or you might volunteer as like, "Oh, that's it's kind of making me anxious. I'm going to go ahead and write that on my sheet," that sort of thing. And we've designed these mods to where like they work independently. So like if you're not playing with the emotions mod, you can still play with the trouble mod. And if you are playing with both of those mods, we have little notes for like how they might interact with each other.
So, I feel like it's designed in a way that works well together, but also, like as you said, independently. So I'm glad you didn't ask me to actually figure out how to get past the pirate queen.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, I mean, how would you want to get past the pirate queen?
You know that cat
Yeah.
that, you saved from the tree? I'm just gonna release it into
Oh
the
my
room.
god. Okay. So I think maybe we put the cat in maybe this cat's just been following us along this entire adventure, and now you're going to use the cat. I love that. That's fantastic. These are only a few of the mods that we've written. We do have more mods and ideas that we are still producing. And like I said earlier, we're working with actual caregiving professionals who are also contributing some writing as well, and kind of couching that in a specific way that we can package it up and separately kind of compile that together as like a toolbox for specific uses. So the current idea is if you are a teacher, well, here are all the like suggested material for running your game in a classroom, as well as advice from professional teachers on how you might run a role playing game in the classroom, especially with as many kids as you might have as a teacher and in the short amount of time that you have.
I'm excited for the things that we're gonna offer for teachers for to do this. This isn't the first time that Nomnivore Games has worked with education and things in mind because Dungeons and Dinos actually has a social and emotional learning pamphlet made as to why you should use that game in the classroom. So I think that at its core, that was always something that was considered on your side of the development things.
We've kind of hinted at it already, but we're talking about different packages and stuff. Really, what it kind of breaks down to is we're going to have the micro system that we're currently calling the Nomventure Primer. And then we're going to have a bigger book that is the Great Big Nomventure that has all of these mods and then more to also include advice for playing the game, running the game. Big book, as I like to shorthand call it at the moment, will also contain some of these extra submitted materials from actual professionals that we've been working with. Whereas our micro light system, that smaller book, the Adventure Primer, will have the core mechanic. Obviously, also comes with a very short adventure and a little bit of advice on how to get started if you are an adventure guide who's never run this before or any role playing game before, how you can get started. We want to be able to support everyone and learn this hobby, and that might mean the adventurous, precocious kid who is immediately interested in becoming a forever game master. But yeah, the Kickstarter is live right now on this day that this is publishing. And if you were lucky enough to immediately jump onto my feed when this published, congratulations. You can go to the show notes and check this out.
I'm super excited and nervous, as you said, for how it will do.
We'll be excited to have you. We're going to be releasing more content and more Kickstarter polls as well along the way throughout the Kickstarter. I highly appreciate all of our listeners who normally come in for the Cortex Prime role playing game for listening through this. And I'm glad you're here, and I look forward to talking and running this game in the future. Brittnay, where can people find you?
I am typically found on Twitch at my screen name is Pixelated Bunny. I am a DM and player for the live plays and all of the community games at twitch.tv/Distal's Place, DISTALPLACE.
And if you didn't catch that, maybe you're driving, maybe you're helping get a cat down from a tree, maybe you're sneaking on board a pirate's ship. Whatever the case is, we're going to have all of this in the show notes, along with the Kickstarter link, along with the link to Nomnivore Games if you want to check out their other products. Everyone's a great role playing game as well. And yeah, we'll see you next time.